All right, everyone. Well, folks are still joining us, but I know we've got lots to get to, and everyone's happy to get to the main event. So I will just go ahead and get started if that is okay with everyone. Hello, welcome. We are so glad that you could join us for this special kickoff event of alumni and friends. My name is Kayla Judd. I'm hosting this evening. I'm the Associate Director of Alumni Engagement here at UC Santa Cruz. And perhaps more relevantly tonight, I'm also a very proud alumna. I know many of us here are UC Santa Cruz alumni, staff, faculty, retirees, but we're also joined by friends and colleagues from other parts of Dr. Blake's life and career. A warm welcome to all of you. I'm truly honored to be here with all of you this evening. And we would love to get a quick look. I know that folks are joining us here on Zoom tonight from all over. So you should see a poll pop up on your screen. You can let us know where you're coming from. I think it's fun to get a sense of everyone that's in the room. So you should be able to answer that. And while you do that, I will get started introducing some of our two speakers tonight. So today's program begins with a conversation of two remarkable leaders and representatives of UC Santa Cruz, Professor Emeritus Dr. J. Herman Blake and Wisdom Cole, an Oaks College alum from the class of 2015. And before we jump into the conversation, I would just like to briefly introduce our speakers and share a bit of their bios. Dr. J. Herman Blake is Professor Emeritus of Sociology at the University of California, Santa Cruz, where he was a member of the founding faculty and served as the founding provost of Oaks College. He is also Professor Emeritus at Iowa State University and the Medical University of South Carolina. Over the course of his long and distinguished career as a scholar, professor, administrator, and community servant, Dr. Blake has held leadership roles across a wide range of institutions, including Eugene M. Lang Visiting Professor for Social Change at Swarthmore College, President of Tougaloo College in Mississippi, Vice Chancellor for Undergraduate Education at Indiana University, Purdue University, Indianapolis, Director of African American Studies at Iowa State University, Scholar in Residence and Founding Director at the Sea Islands Institute at the University of South Carolina, Beaufort, and inaugural Humanities Scholar in Residence at the Medical University of South Carolina, Charleston. His scholarship and service have focused on advancing educational equity, uplifting historically vulnerable communities, and preserving the Gullah Geechee cultural heritage. Among many honors, Dr. Blake has received 6 honorary degrees, 2 presidential medals, the Fiat Lux Award from UC Santa Cruz, and the Distinguished Career Award for the Practice of Sociology from the American Sociological Association. Thank you so much for being here with us tonight, Dr. Blake. I am also delighted to introduce UC Santa Cruz alumnus Wisdom Cole, who currently serves as the Senior Director of Advocacy at the NAACP. In his previous role as National Director for the NAACP Youth and College Division, he served more than 700 youth councils, high school chapters, and college chapters actively involved in the fight for civil rights. Wisdom brings extensive experience in civil rights advocacy via the Training Institute, electoral action training, grassroots organizing, issues toolkits, and webinars at the local, state, and national level. He has managed national campaign efforts focused on building Black political power through youth leadership development advocacy, and direct action, organizing for the past 5 years with the NAACP, formerly as the National Campaigns and Training Manager. In his time at the NAACP, he's worked on campaigns around the cancellation of student debt, removing police from schools, as well as increasing voter access for young Black people. He has been featured on Politico, NPR, Vice, NBC Washington News, Brookings Institute, and The Economist as an advocate for Black youth voter turnout through issue-based campaign organizing. In 2023, he was recognized in Politico's Recast Power List 2023, honoring those who are changing the world through race and politics. Wisdom was previously a field and state conference organizer for the African Black Coalition, ABC, the largest Black collegiate organization in California. In 2014, he collaboratively organized the African Black Coalition Conference that featured keynote speakers such as Mark Lamont Hill, Angela Davis, Bobby Seale, and Atala Shabazz. For this effort, he received the Chancellor's Achievement Award for Diversity in recognition for outstanding contributions to furthering diversity, inclusion, and excellence at UC Santa Cruz. Wisdom grew up in California, where he earned a BA in chemistry with a minor in STEM education from UC Santa Cruz, as well as an MA in teaching from the University of San Francisco. We are so honored to have you both here. Thank you for joining us. And with that, I will hand things over to Wisdom.
Thank you so much, Kayla. Appreciate that introduction. It's great to be here with so many UCSC alumni. This is a really beautiful group of people who have made a massive difference in my own life. And so I'm excited to be here with the great Dr. Herman Blake. Really quickly, for all the alumni that are here, I know that you may know a person who also graduated at your year, somebody who may be a younger alumni of UCSC. If you have their number, I really encourage you to text them to join this call right now. You know, this is going to be a really important conversation around the history of UC Santa Cruz, thinking about the 60th anniversary and celebrating all the amazing people who came out of it. But also, we want to get into a place where we're talking about what allowed us to come to this place in time. And so Dr. Blake, you know, UCSC's founders envisioned not just a university, but a community, one rooted in the values of justice, dialogue, and deep intellectual curiosity. As we celebrate the 60th this year, I want to begin with the foundation. I know in meeting you when I was just a freshman at UC Santa Cruz, we talked about, you know, the ability for a university to be a place for a human community rooted in academic and intellectual excellence. I wanted to hear from you what that means exactly.
First of all, I think it means respect for everybody in the gathering when you come together. It is so important to recognize that we bring different histories, different life experiences together, and we cannot assume that it is all flowing together. So we have to listen carefully and respect each other. That is very important. Let me give you one or two examples of how that came about very early on. First of all, I like to think about a conversation I had with a colleague, Todd Newberry, who taught biology. And this was in my first year, and Todd and I were talking about teaching and reaching students. And Todd gave me his approach. He said, quotes, "It is all of me teaching all of you." That was a profound statement to me about the person on the other side, that he paid attention to everything they brought. As I look at the list of people who are on this call right now, I see people from multiple backgrounds. I'm not going to call their names, but they make me well up as I think about the times and the places in which we have worked together. All of you reaching all of us, trying to build a community which could only exist if it had excellence. There's one other example I want to use. Very early on, like in my first year, Paige Smith and Jasper Rose in our faculty meetings used to talk about how students could be educated in the community. And they talked about sending students to the community to learn and then come back to the campus. I stood up, challenged them, and objected because I argued that what they were doing was sending students into the community to learn from the community, but the community did not gain any benefit. Where I'm talking about when I say excellence is they listened to me and they worked with me, and together we organized and developed an incredible service and learning experience which allowed our students to serve communities and learn from them, and allowed the university to also teach those communities. And I would dare say that even on this call, and if not on this call, among the alumni, there are people from the Sea Islands of South Carolina, from Alameda County, and particularly North Richmond, and from Stanislaus County, who have graduated from the University of California, Santa Cruz. So in my view, it's a point of listening, effectively responding, and serving, all within a context of high expectations. High expectations.
I love that. I think that's the point of higher education, of universities, right? These places and spaces where people who are coming from various backgrounds. I remember I saw a lot of people who are here tonight are from or live in Northern California. I'm from Southern California, grew up in San Bernardino, California. And coming to Santa Cruz, it was the first time that I met some people who were from Eritrea, the first time I met people who had grown up in the Bay, the first time I met some people from South Carolina, and all over the country, as well as the world, right? And to be able to have a place and space where you can have dialogue and understand one another, but also have the opportunity to serve community and support through the values and principles that UC Santa Cruz holds was truly amazing. And so, would love to hear from you, Dr. Blake. Why was it important to you from the beginning, right? The very beginning, that the education at UCSC be both intellectually rigorous and socially responsible?
Well, socially responsible because we are a nation of a wide range of cultures and groups. Indeed, the statement that they usually use in beginning programs now speaks to the origins of our cultures and speaks to the people who have sacrificed their cultures in order that we can flourish. That is so very, very, very important. Now, repeat your question again.
So, when we were talking about this conversation, you mentioned that UC Santa Cruz was really meant to be intellectually rigorous and socially responsible.
Let me come to the intellectually rigorous. None of us know what we can best accomplish and understand. And by being intellectually high quality, high expectations, and rigorous. Note, I do not use the term high standards. That's often used as a barrier term for people from different communities. But high expectations, you never know when you're going to light a spark that you least expected. I remember pushing science at Oaks College, and a young African American student came in, female, and said to me she wasn't interested in science. She was interested in philosophy. I thought it was so wonderful that she would have this particular interest. So high expectations and intellectual rigor are very, very critical to our reaching out in places that we never expected. When we started, we would work with students thinking we had to, quote, tutor them or prepare them. We found so many of those students had qualities of determination and expectations of their own that they didn't need to be pushed or tutored. They only needed to be given an opportunity to learn. And we ultimately published an article on the positive consequences of students that we had not seen. It's a matter of being careful about what you look at and being careful about what you see and always going back for repeated opportunities.
Absolutely. I remember when I was making the choice to go to UC Santa Cruz and reading about the history, right? I remember that back in the day, Santa Cruz, rather than giving just letter grades, it was a pass-fail system with a narrative, right? The idea that, students are more than just grades, but also making sure that they are encompassed by what their activities, what they've done, what they've learned throughout the semester. And so just even thinking about that time, when we're thinking about the 60 years of UC Santa Cruz, the university was really born out of a moment of tremendous social upheaval, right? This was the civil rights movement. This was Vietnam. This was women's liberation. And yet UC Santa Cruz forged a bold new mold for higher education, right? The idea that higher education could be done differently, that we could still have that intellectual rigor, but continue to also be socially responsible. And so I'm interested to hear from you, how did UC Santa Cruz founding vision allow faculty and students to explore the intersectionality of scholarship and social change?
I could talk for the next 2 hours about that.
I know you can.
First of all, it allowed faculty to explore in creative ways paths they might not have otherwise pursued. Not that it was tied to a particular discipline or degree, it was tied to a creative mind that was prepared to look and understand in ways they might not have. I ended up teaching a course with John DeZikas, a historian, and we combined our two disciplines, history and sociology, into a course on history and sociology of America in the 19th and 20th century. And what I'm saying is, first of all, Santa Cruz allowed faculty to go in a million directions as long as they maintain those high expectations. And a better person for that couldn't have been Jasper Rose. You thought one way about him, but when you learned more, you thought many other ways. I felt that was the case about me, and I felt it was the case about people we had in Oaks College and in the other colleges. They were very creative. We had a fellow from Cowell College who came over to Oaks and taught a course on the biology of cancer. Well, now he reached out to students who were neither in biology or in science, but drew them in such a way that they became more knowledgeable about disease and illness in American society and much more knowledgeable about how social organizations could respond. It was a way of opening up things. Let me say one final point. Dean McHenry worked with all of us, I know, and he often said to me, you need to have every opportunity you can to succeed. And when I went to him with an idea, sometimes he didn't think it was good. Sometimes he didn't know what it was. But I got the money I needed to develop the programs I wanted. And we ultimately succeeded. It's like not drawing conclusions before you have a profound insight and understanding.
That's phenomenal. That's just the opportunity to explore those ideas. I know myself and probably many other alumni that are on this call, may have started in one direction when they came to UC Santa Cruz and ended up in a completely separate direction, right? I came to Santa Cruz thinking I was going to become a medical doctor. I was a chemistry major. That's what I knew full force I was going to do. But with the opportunity to explore social justice and social change, this was the wake of the Black Lives Matter movement. And so as a science student, seeing these things happen, I was looking and searching for the intersections between science and social justice. And actually at Oaks College, that's when I actually came across the first Science for Social Justice program, where I'm like, oh, these aren't two independent thoughts or two independent courses of study, but these actually can be one and the same, right? When you're talking about the biology of cancer, when you're understanding things like the AIDS epidemic, when you're understanding things that impact certain communities, right? How do we understand that from a biological, scientific, mathematical, et cetera level? And I think that kind of paid off. When I was a student there was an opportunity to interact directly with a research scientist who was an in residence at the Beco House. And so to hear that as an opportunity and support from administration and faculty is amazing. But I also know this was, the 60s. Not everything was going in the right direction. There absolutely was probably opposition going on. And so I would love to hear from you. Were there moments where you had to fight to protect that vision, especially as the political climate shifted, right? And I think that we're in another moment like this right now with the attacks on higher education. So it'd be great, in this principle of Sankofa, to really look back at your experience and see what are ways that you were able to shift and move when you were fighting to protect the vision.
Well, I don't call it so much a fight to protect the vision in the sense of fight. There were hostilities toward us. There was opposition. What amazed me was, even in the face of that hostility and opposition, there was an amazing amount of support. Support from people you didn't know about. When I used to fight with Paige Smith and Jasper Rhodes sometimes in faculty meetings in Carroll College, in the senior common room or wherever we would gather, I thought I was alone. But I would get handwritten notes later on telling me to continue going the way I went. I didn't know who these people were. But when I met some of them later, I found out that they had an understanding of the challenges facing all of us, but that they also knew that the path I was trying to push us down was of value. I don't really feel at any point we were at the point of losing, a point of not being able to accomplish what we wanted to accomplish. We just had to continue to be creative and to be disciplined. I received an email just the other day from a student who was a fresh person at a Carroll College when I came. And the message she wrote me was, she was 17 when she met me. And she didn't know anything, but she continued to search and search. She was not a minority student. She was from Los Angeles, and she was arguing with herself about religious convictions. I got an email from her last week saying, I'm now 78. And now I've been able to accomplish certain things through publications and other organizations that I had no idea about then. I had a sense that all around me were people who were pulling for me and who were pushing for me, and we would overcome those who were against us, and we did.
It's amazing just to hear that story and to hear about the consistency and persistence that you had in that moment in time. I think there's a lot of lessons that we can learn from that. Still being consistent now, still continuing to keep the faith, and recognizing that we are working to build a community of legacy, which takes me to the next part of our discussion. Today we celebrate the 50 plus reunion classes, right? Reunions remind us the community doesn't end at graduation, it evolves. One of the things I love so much about Santa Cruz is that there is a really deep history of community, that folks stay connected, that there are people in all walks of life who've come from UC Santa Cruz. And so we'd love to hear from you, Dr. Blake. What does it mean for you to see former students decades later, to hear things like that, and returning with not just memories, but new wisdom to offer? Are there ways that you are staying connected, ways in which you are engaging? Are there people here on this call that you're recognizing from your past?
Oh, yes, I'm recognizing them and they're recognizing me. I'm not going to call names, but I see the heads bobbing. And there's some who never came to Santa Cruz, never went to Santa Cruz, but we met in other situations and they're on the call too. So there were all of these things, but there are 2 points I want to make before we get to that. One was Alan Chadwick starting a garden up around Merrill and Crown College, and that ultimately became the campus farm. Or Dean McHenry pushing the Arboretum so that ideas, which were almost like seeds, were allowed to flourish and grow, and they have become institutions at Santa Cruz. I see students who have accomplished beyond belief and expectations. I got an email this morning from one who was not on the call, but who is a national leader in the social sciences. I see on the screen distinguished scholars, actors, medical doctors, and others. I don't recognize everybody who's in this call, but I recognize enough that I realize several things. I've had a good life, and two, the wheels keep turning and the grass keeps growing and the benefits keep going to community after community after community. The vision that I saw when I looked at that Monterey Bay, and I felt it was like endless possibilities, continues to be the same.
That's beautiful. I remember that look and seeing it and just being able to be amongst a community of people who were striving to do better, who were striving to improve themselves and their community, and were connected with one another, right? The ability to continue to build those bridges. And I really think about, the opportunity to be able to pay it forward, right? The idea of the conversations that we've had, the conversations I've had with other alumni. I recognize alumni here on this call. Hey, Adila, good to see you. Want to understand your thoughts around what is the role that alumni play in mentoring the next generation of thinkers and leaders.
Well, the people on the call can answer that much better than me. But let me say that as a leader, in terms of being the provost at Oaks College and subsequently a president at Tougaloo College, where some of your colleagues have graduated, and other places, the continued support is very, very important. Now, alumni people are constantly calling for you to make financial contributions. They are extremely important. But the idea that someone is in my corner, standing behind me, is very, very important. And I think sometimes when you can't put a dollar in your envelope, you can put a letter that says, keep on keeping on. And yet, person is encouraged to continue to stand and be courageous in the face of opposition. There's a lot of opposition, and we need alumni. We need them to stay with us, stay strong, and to cheer us on. I love them.
Absolutely. I know, there are tons of students currently at UC Santa Cruz who are seeking mentorship, who love to stay connected to UCSC alumni. I was just at a convening maybe 2 weeks ago, and there was a bunch of UCSC students who were just eager to connect and chat and hear, right, and be inspired by certain ways. I know when I connected with you my freshman year, just the evolution and the way in which Oaks College, right, was built out inspired me so much to understand the way in which you can build a vision, which really brings us to our final point for tonight, is talking about one of the greatest legacies that I believe that you contributed to that we see at UC Santa Cruz, which is Oaks College, right? Now celebrating 50 years. Oaks wasn't supposed to be just another college. It was, and you correct me if I'm wrong, it was a radical idea that was made real, right? The idea that we could build something such as Oaks College. And so I really love the way in which you have been able to paint the history about how Oaks came to be. Wanted you to share with everybody here. And if you are an Oaks alumni, definitely drop that in the chat. What inspired the founding of Oaks?
Well, it was a community in many respects. College 7 was going to open. College 7 was going to be. But the people in the community and the communities felt that they had a role to play, and they began to push for the college to take a particular shape. Now, it didn't become exactly what they wanted, but there are people on this call I know who were a part of those early times, some who were in high school at the time the community began to push for a different focus on in terms of hopes. It was a matter of bringing together the external and the internal forces so that we weren't just a city on the hill. We were a community which had excellence at the top, but also reaching down to the roots to make sure we could come together in creative ways. I was motivated and inspired as a child by reading the story of George Washington Carver. And I won't go into it now, but it was such an inspiration to read about a person who was born a slave, who was then traded for a horse, who became a distinguished scientist and a consultant to the President of the United States, and whose research and work is still a part of our international and other activities. What I'm saying is, it was my inspiration, but there were a lot of people along the way of all backgrounds who gave me a push, who held up my hand, and who worked with me. And I will always be grateful to them because the entire view that I had when I arrived at Oaks, that I saw Monterey Bay and the Pacific Ocean, there were no limits. And today, I'd say there are no limits. And although I'm 91, I got another 20 years of work to do. So y'all go ahead.
Absolutely, absolutely. And we see a couple Oaks alumni in the chat. How's it going, Danny? How's it going, Cheryl? How's it going, Cynthia? A lot of admiration for the work that you did, Dr. Blake. I want to talk with you just further about Oaks College. This was a place for me that I know I found refuge. I learned how to be an organizer, had the opportunity to be a part of several grassroots student movements. I know when we were talking, when I joined UC Santa Cruz and was looking for where should I live on campus, I ended up living in the Stephen Biko building. But there also was apartments named after Malcolm X and Shabazz and other civil rights leaders from different historically marginalized and excluded community. And so Oaks has been a place that centered students who come from diverse backgrounds. And I feel like this has kind of been a theme that we've been talking about this evening. But how did you push back against the idea that diversity and academic excellence were somehow in conflict? I think that comes up time and time again in different higher education spaces. And I think we're facing this, in real time right now with the current administration. But what were you doing to push back against that ideas?
I was trying my best to be an example that contradicted every one of those assumptions. In my work and in my reaching out to others, we constantly saw it. Let me tell you, I constantly saw it, and I'm seeing names now of people who were right there. And in some cases, I'm seeing the names of people whose parents pushed me and pushed them, like Susan Lindheim, whose mother was a part of helping us begin to think about Oaks College, or Cynthia Geyer, whose parents opened up another world and we began to create for others. But there were those who had no resources and had very little opportunity, who simply would not stop when given a chance. And we had faculty who continued to encourage them. I don't know what I did in every way to fight back against those forces. I just knew I had to be good at the things I had to do, and I couldn't let others discourage me.
Absolutely. And I'm seeing some of the remarks here in the chat around the founding of Oaks College. Are any particular stories? I remember you talking about some of the stories of meeting with students in apartments and planning and discussing any particular stories that come to mind that capture the heart of what Oaks became.
Are you asking me?
I'm asking you. Yeah.
Okay, I'll give you an example. In my teaching, I always talked about my family home in South Carolina, the home of the Gullah Geechee people. And in one of my presentations, I talked about some of the community practices of reconciliation and community building that led to stronger Gullah Geechee communities in isolated places. Two students walked into my office. They were not from South Carolina. They were not Gullah Geechee. They were from places like San Diego or other places. They were two, what we would be calling at that time, white students. They picked up on the idea and they transformed it into a community building idea in Oaks, so that we began to do, quote, Gullah Geechee kind of visiting in Oaks apartments and meeting each other. And that then led to a whole thing where they started holding these things in the recreation room where everybody would bring a plate. And people would try to see how large a plate they could fix. We had a visit from some reporters from Newsweek magazine at a time when our students were doing that. Let me tell you, students eat and enjoy eating from all cultures and all backgrounds, and they weren't putting up any barriers. They were just trying to get to each other and to that food. I'm saying that listening, and growing and reaching out to others, I'm overwhelmed by it. I'm overwhelmed by the thought. I'm overwhelmed by the thought. Maybe I need to live another 30 years so I can continue to write. It's wonderful. Y'all keep on keeping on.
I love it. I love it. So as we wrap up, I definitely want to get to some questions from the audience. But the last question I want to ask you, Dr. Blake, just looking at the history of UC Santa Cruz, looking at the history of Oaks, looking at the history of all of the amazing alumni that have come from this institution, what is your greatest hope for UC Santa Cruz in the next 50 years?
Well, I don't know what the 50 years will look like politically, socially, economically, or other things. But my greatest hope would be that they would keep an awareness and understanding of the roots, the foundations. Santa Cruz came from an idea from Clark Kerr. Oaks came from an idea of a community member. The building of community across all sorts of apartments and lines came from the ideas of students from other backgrounds. My greatest hope would be that we would listen eloquently to each other. We would respect each other and we would honor each other and continue to move in the most creative ways we can, recognizing that when we get to the table, we need to make sure we reach out to the others who have yet to reach that point.
Absolutely. That was so beautifully and eloquently said. I agree. I think the next 50 years, I feel like right now we're at a very much similar time to how Oaks and UC Santa Cruz was formed out of, right? Out of contention politically, out of discrimination, when we're seeing a rise of differences of ideology, right? But as my mom said, you have two ears and one mouth, so you should listen twice as much as you speak. And so how do we have opportunities to listen to one another, to connect and build with one another, to continue? I love the way you said it, be creative, right? Because I think we need some more creative solutions to some difficult problems. We got to think about different ways in which we can teach the courses in history. I see people in the chat talking about the formation of ethnic studies, the formation of the African American Resource Center, all things that were necessary to help build and continue the legacy of Oaks College. But now we want to get into some questions from the audience. So if you have a question for Dr. Blake, if you can just drop it in the chat. We have some time to read off a couple questions, get into some dialogue there, but feel free to drop that in the chat. The Q&A function isn't working right now, but drop your question in the chat and we will get to as many of them as possible.
I am blown away by the names I'm seeing in that chat.
It's a blast from the past.
People I haven't seen or heard of since 1969, 1970. It is really moving me.
I see Misha, I graduated from UCSC in 1975. That fall, my then spouse, Dan Scripture, and I served as residential advisors to Oak students who lived the F loop on the student apartments because Oaks College dormitories were still in the process of being built. Some of the people I met then became lifelong friends and colleagues. Shout out to Misha. I also was an RA at Oaks College. Thank you for leading that way. I see Ben Borton. He said, I took a course on the Black experience from Professor Blake in 1968. I found it transformative. Very sorry that the country has progressed so little in the areas of racial equality and racial justice. Thank you, Ben. I see, I believe it's Penina Weinberg.
Penny Weinberg, yes.
Weinberg.
Lord, Penny, yes.
My time at Beaufort was also life-changing, really opened my eyes. First group in Beaufort and the trio on us helped communities in many ways. Cal, class of 70.
Penny was in a community which was only 1 square mile. And she did a community service that was outstanding. I think she became a rabbi. I'm not sure. But at any rate, she was incredible.
All right. I see a question from, I believe it's Denise Crowley, uh,
Desney Crossley.
Desney Crowsley,
Yeah.
class of 1976. How can we support students and staff at UCSC now that even employee safety is considered DEI?
Well, Desney is now living in Panama, and she and her husband have had an incredible career. Uh, she has been a very strong force mobilizing alumni. And I think she is a model for all of you to continue to come together and support Santa Cruz and grow.
Absolutely. I think it's really, again, like we've been talking about, pouring back into students, showing students that we support them, recognizing that these attacks on DEI is really an attack on our social safety nets, and that there's ways in which that our universities, right, as alumni, can commit to diversity no matter what. That's what the foundation of the college was built on. The staff that we have there are there supporting our students, and without staff or former staff like Dr. Blake and others, we couldn't be where we're at today. I got a question from Cheryl Scott. What is your vision for how universities can protect national academic integrity and freedom during this challenging time? Great question, Cheryl.
I had the privilege of working under and with the president of the University of California, who refused to sign the loyalty oath. We need to have the courage to stand up and go forward regardless of the circumstances. It's not easy. It's not comforting. And in many a night or day, we'll weep. But there is possibilities beyond that. Last night, before I went to bed, I listened to the Playing for Change Orchestra perform A Change Is Gonna Come, the Sam Cooke piece. But it was the orchestra playing for change that I watched. And what it is people come together with common interests and they stand up against it. I am not certain we have simple and easy ways. We've got to continue to do what you've been doing for a long time now, wisdom. Stay strong and stay steady.
Absolutely. And I think different ways in which we do that. I see Melvin Cox, who's in the chat as well, a great alumni of UC Santa Cruz, who was consistently bringing students to Africa to have that experience. So thank you, Melvin Cox, for being here. I'm seeing a question from Claire. Do you recommend every student take a core class to study in nonviolence here in Santa Cruz or any university in it to have the courage or the manners for the students of the current time?
I recommend that students take courses in a wide range of subjects, but particularly the ones that are unpopular and may seem to be unimportant. We continued to do that. I remember teaching a course with Dilip Basu on the role of violence and nonviolence in social change. We wanted to have our students understand much more about particularly the philosophy of nonviolent and passive resistance. I do recommend there be a variety of courses that allow flowers of new ideas to flourish. I'm not in favor of the mandated or required courses. Neither were the Oaks College students, but we found that there were ways in which we could build common ground and common communities.
Agreed. And I remember, being back at Santa Cruz, a lot of what I was learning as a freshman, as a sophomore, was the ability just to communicate with my peers. I think in this moment in time, folks have been impacted by the pandemic, and just the ability to communicate with one another and to understand one another. There's tons of mis and disinformation out there around our various communities. And oftentimes it just takes conversations and opportunities for understanding, but also being exposed to literature, being exposed to reading, being exposed to various experiences that allow you to see the value in diversity, to allow you to see the value in diversity of thought. I'm seeing Steve Bryant. I graduated from Oaks in 1977. First occupants in the new residence. Herman was nothing but an inspiration to me those 4 years.
Wow. I remember Steve.
I see Ken Block. This white boy is eternally grateful for the Sundays I got to spend at the Moving Star Hall on Johns Island, and especially with you. Although for me, this was a unique and life-affirming experience, I was aware that for you, I was one of many. My memories are enough for both of us.
Let me say that Ken Block and that experience at Moving Star Hall. Moving Star Hall was a remnant of the slave era, when slaves could not gather without a plantation owner being present. So they had secret places they used to go and worship that the slave owners did not know about. And Moving Star Hall was one of them. And I remember going to Moving Star Hall with Steve Bryan and some other Santa Cruz students. And the people were overwhelmed because they didn't know, the students didn't know how to worship the way the Gullah Geechee folk worship. But what they did was they expressed their sincere feelings about that worship service. It's indescribably moving because it's rooted in our antebellum past, but it takes a student like Ken Bryant, Cheryl Scott, Adila, and all of the others into that unlimited future. I'm overwhelmed.
I can see it. I can see it and feel the love. And the fact that feeling still carries generations later, right? I graduated 10 years ago. And the feeling that you're talking about with students, with faculty, is some of the same relationships that I have with my peers and people who are part of the UCSC space. I think we're gonna take one more question that I see here in the chat from Darian DeLu. It says, community seems to be fraying these days. Does Dr. Blake have any suggestions for how we can encourage community in our own lives and areas?
Communities may fray in some ways, but in other ways they unite. I think we have to follow the wisdom of your mother. 2 ears and 1 mouth, to listen, and in ways we can figure out ways to build bridges and establish connections. Sometimes it's only 2 people. Sometimes it's only 4. The way in which Saul Alinsky and the people in the Woodlawn organization did it in Chicago was different from the ways we do it in other places. I don't think communities are fraying. I think there are communities which are in opposition to each other, but within the hearts of some of those people, you find unity, community, and future hope.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, Dr. Blake, this has been a really great conversation. I've really enjoyed reminiscing on the origins of UC Santa Cruz, the origins of Oaks College, hearing the stories, seeing the alumni. This is a really powerful group of people. We have almost 100 people on this call tonight, coming from various walks of life, different parts of California, different parts of the country. And so I know this has truly been an inspiration and an opportunity to continue to recall. A couple things before I turn it back over to Kayla and Dr. Blake. I'll actually give you the last word. One, really want to shout out the alumni who are part of the African Black and Caribbean community, who've been meeting and working together to really give an opportunity for African Black and Caribbean students to come together as alumni. In the chat, I'm actually going to drop a link to a survey, August 15th through the 17th. There's going to be a UCSC campus reunion over the weekend, and specifically on August 16th, there's going to be a reunion specifically for the African Black Caribbean alumni students of Santa Cruz. And so it's an opportunity to connect. We're talking about mixers, we're talking about panels, reunions, barbecues, all that great stuff. Really want it to be a family function. And so if you are interested in attending that, I'm going to urge you to complete the link in the chat. If you know somebody who's a part of the African Black Caribbean background who went to UC Santa Cruz but is not on tonight's call, definitely urge you to be a part of that and have them fill out that link there. We're excited to bring African Black and Caribbean students back together to UC Santa Cruz. I know I oftentimes go back and definitely would love the opportunity to reconnect with alumni, because alumni honestly are the way in which I've been able to excel in my career, build out my life, and understand more about this world that we live in. But before we wrap up, Dr. Blake, wanted to see if you had the last word for this evening before we turn it back over to Kayla.
I can't say that I have the last word in the terms of a permanent statement that will stick with you forever. But for me, when I think of Santa Cruz, I think of endless possibilities. And that is because that bay and that ocean and the birds and the other animals that I used to see as I jogged along Bay Street speak to us about the powerful force the human spirit can be. The powerful force, even as an individual, like George Washington Carver, or multiple individuals like Clark Kerr and David Saxon and Dean McHenry, or the women who worked with them, for them, led them, and taught them, like your mother. Let's draw them all together and just keep on keeping on.
Okay. With that, Kayla, I will turn it back over to you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Blake and Mr. Cole, for sharing your time and your stories and your insights with us. I know that I'm so grateful for this conversation. I think I can say that on behalf of the folks here. And before we sort of a transition into the next part of this event, the kind of more specific, informal alumni conversation, I would just invite folks who are with us, if they'd like to leave a note for Dr. Blake in the chat. I will make sure that I capture all of those notes, and I will send them over to Dr. Blake. If there are more things that you'd like to say or share, you're also welcome to send me an email, and I can help facilitate those messages. I will put my email in the chat right now. But would love for you before, I know that not everyone will stay and join us for the alumni portion, but before you leave, I'd love for you to leave a note And I just want to say thank you to everyone, again, to Dr. Blake and Mr. Cole, and to everyone here for just making this such a special conversation. So thank you so much, everyone. And we'll just we'll take a moment, we'll take a brief break. If folks want to leave a note and head on with their evening, or alumni who'd like to stick around.